It is so hard. You know, when you see LA movies, things shot there. I just saw one called You People that he did it as a love letter to LA, Kenya Barris. And, you know, he said, I just want to find places you've never seen.
Yeah, yeah.
That is a
it's
huge
hard, though.
challenge.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And even the buildings, they don't date back like 200 years or even 100 because there's not a lot of that kind of town planning thing going on.
Not in this town.
No, no.
Is it 6 years since your mammy and daddy died, Siobhan, or is it 7 years since they died?
It's coming up to 8 years, Mrs. McCormack.
Is it coming up to 8 years? Doesn't time be flying?
Aye, and you're having fun.
I'll be off to the pub now, Porg, if you're going to be annoying us.
I don't have to be down there every night, do I?
Column Sonny Larry scared them off, I suppose.
What did you hear of Column Sonny Larry?
Didn't you and he used to be the best of friends?
We're still the best of friends.
No, you're not.
Who says we're not?
She says.
Ah, for God's sake, Siobhan.
I said nothing of the like, Mrs. McCormack. I was just chatting. Now, you go off to John Joe's, Porg, and don't be getting under our feet. Or Mrs. McCormack never gets a chance to come over for a chat.
She never gets a chance because you avoid her.
I do not avoid
You
her.
hide behind walls if she's coming up the road.
I do not hide behind walls.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. Today, wow, I was just leaning over to I cannot recite all the awards he has been nominated for and winning so far just this year alone for his latest film, The Banshees of Inisherin, and that included the Golden Globe for Best Picture Drama and Writing, and nominations for BAFTA, Oscar nominations galore, and on down the line. Welcome, Martin McDonagh.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks for having me.
I always like to talk to you and always look forward to whatever your next movie is going to be. And this one did not disappoint at all.
Thank you.
I'm just astounded. I look on Wikipedia and I look in the little boxes with the filmographies and the different things. And really only 4 films that you've done. I kept thinking, oh, you've done so many. But
no, 1 short and four features in like 15 years, maybe.
Yeah, well, you won an Academy Award for the short.
Yeah.
And then, of course, In Bruges and 7 Psychopaths and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. So what propels you, because obviously you're a very accomplished playwright and love the theater as well.
Thank you.
So what propels you towards movies when you want to make something that's a movie as opposed to for the stage here?
Well, weirdly, I always loved movies more than theater to begin with.
You do, and see, I would have guessed it would have been the opposite.
Oh
just
God,
no.
no.
With all your trilogies and everything you've done for the theater.
Yeah, well, it was. I mean, I did sort of fall in love with it after a while, theater. But no, my first love as a kid was movies. Ever since I saw, you know, Badlands and Days of Heaven and the De Niro Scorsese films,
right.
I was hooked. So I kind of fell into theatre by accident almost. But after 10 years of that, I kind of got my first chance to try to do something in movies, and that was a short.
Yeah.
And that went well, and I met Brendan, and I think I'd written In Bruges just before that, so it was a perfect time to then go on and make that one with Colin and Brendan.
Yeah, that's amazing, you know, that your inspirations were all movies. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, like most of my plays are sort of as cinematic as possible. There's usually a lot of gunfights or explosions or animals or, you know, stuff I've used in movies too. But yeah, I always wanted to make something on stage that was exciting for a film goer almost. And it kind of worked out that way too.
That's really interesting too. And Brendan Gleeson, who's of course nominated for an Oscar this year as well, and Colin Farrell, you worked with not only in Bruges, with them as hitmen, but in the short, Brendan was in that too.
Brendan was in the short, yeah. And I'd weirdly worked with his son Donal, I think, before that too, or around the same time, and Donal was in the short as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then I remember, I think Colin and Brendan were friends before that anyway, so they really wanted to work together as well. So In Bruges was like a perfect vehicle almost to get them together with me, and I had always wanted to work with both of them too.
Yeah, and then of course Colin in Seven Psychopaths, and now this. So you seem to gravitate towards your own little rep company here.
Very much so, yeah. I used to love the whole idea of that, like the Preston Sturges rep company, and
right. Orson Welles.
Orson Welles, even Sam Peckinpah used a lot of the same people. Scorsese again, but yeah, it's I don't know if it's just being comfortable with the same people, but they're all great actors, you know.
Yeah.
So the Irish ones in this, and then like Sam Rockwell and Chris Walken, who I hope to work with again. So yeah, it's like they're the best, and then really nice people too. So it's a no-brainer to keep going back to them for me.
And you have a certain shorthand then as a director, working as a director with people you've worked with before.
Very much so. On this one particularly, I think I'd worked with, we only had like 10 or 11 actors in the whole thing. I think I'd worked with them all either on a movie or play,
right.
or the short film years ago.
Kerry Condon, yeah.
Kerry
right.
Condon I'd worked with on a play 21 years ago, 22 years ago, and she subsequently did a couple of others. But even the policeman, Gary Lydon, he was in the short film. The priest in this was the guy, I don't even remember the guy who stabs the cow in the short film.
Yeah.
That's the same guy.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So and he was in one of the plays too. So it's great to be like the first day on set. It's a family. You know them all. They know how you work almost. They know the rhythm of the language, and there's no hierarchy almost of it's not even like as if they're scared of working with two movie stars like Colin and Brendan. It's family.
I love the fact you said the rhythm of the language, because that's the exact phrase I used talking to Colin Farrell in that very chair you're sitting in right now. So impressed with the dialogue, the way it sings, the way it moves, the rhythms.
Yeah.
Very important in your movies.
Very much so. And the play, I guess that's a hangover from the plays. The dialogue is very, very specific, very melodic, I guess, in a way. Heightened would be another word for it. But yeah, and I do like to stick to that kind of, I'm not an improv kind of guy on set.
I asked him that too. Oh, can you make up your own stuff? No.
No.
I got that answer.
because really there is a musicality to it, especially right. on a comedic line too, I think. But at the same time, I don't think the guys have ever felt like they're straitjacketed by it. Right. It's just a different way of approaching a scene, I think, is knowing that you have to stick to that. There's still like a myriad amount of interpretations of those lines, and it's that I kind of really want to get at. How sad do you play a line? How much do you over-egg the comedy, which isn't something we ever do, but what kind of truth can you get, and what variations of truth on a line is much more interesting to me than trying to do different versions of the words themselves.
Well, I've never seen a Martin McDonagh movie not directed by Martin McDonagh, and so I have to say, would you trust your screenplay in the hands of any other director? I've
wondered that over the years. I've kind of got a couple of things that I know I probably won't direct, but maybe that's because they're not very good. But I think I'm kind of a control freak in a lot of ways, and I think I'd find it very hard, to be honest. It definitely wouldn't be it wouldn't have the same kind of imprint that the films I have made have.
Yeah, 'cause I always wonder that about writer-directors and things, and about letting that baby out in the world in other hands. It makes sense to want to do it. Of course, there are famous writers. Neil Simon famously never directed anything.
Yeah.
But he had complete control over every line in his plays. So.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I knew I had to direct the movies is that screenwriters aren't really respected enough, I think, and their words can be changed, so I couldn't let any of that kind of thing happen. Conversely, I probably couldn't give it to another director to direct, because I wouldn't want to box them in too, you know, and say you have to, you know, follow every, you know, the director has to be free to do exactly what he or her wants to do with the script, I think. So yeah, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and keep keep churning them out very slowly myself.
Interestingly, and people have mentioned this to you many times, but you love to put the location in the title of your movies, of your plays.
Yeah, it's very lazy.
Or just reminds you where the hell you are.
Yeah. We know where we are to begin with. Yeah, Bruges had it, obviously. Or a number, I think, oftentimes. Is it like 3 billboards, 7 psychopaths?
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty...
Yeah, 7 Psychopaths didn't have the location in it, but, you know, 3 billboards did. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like, maybe it's because I started with Bruges and that place was such a character in the film, cinematically. Each of the other films I've tried to do the same thing. It's harder with LA, which is where 7 Psychopaths was set, because it's got such a history in cinema.
Yeah.
But definitely finding the right billboard road and town was uppermost when we were making 3 billboards. And this, as you know, was filmed. Inisherin isn't a real island or place in Ireland, but it was an amalgamation of 2 beautiful places, Inishmore, one of the Aran Islands, and Achill. So to have those 2 places become one almost mythic island, and have that island be as cinematic as possible was what we really wanted to go for with this.
Yeah, beautifully shot. And
Ben Davis did such immaculate work with this film, the cinematographer, and he did my last 2 films too, but this one especially is stunning, I think. It's really beautiful.
He did 7 Psychopaths too?
And 3 billboards,
okay.
yeah.
I was going to ask you, before we get into a little more on Inisherin, is shooting in Los Angeles, all the ghost of all the great filmmakers, Hollywood, all of that here. What was that like for you, coming in and shooting in this town?
I think it might have weighed on me a little much. I think it's harder to find a new distinctive way to shoot LA.
To shoot LA, I know.
Yeah, we tried and had a brilliant production designer in David Wasco, who's a genius, and we found some interesting new places, but it wasn't definitely as easy as finding the places in Bruges or, you know, Inishmore, which haven't really been touched in cinema.
Right, it is so hard. You know, when you see LA movies, things shot there. I just saw one called You People that he did it as a love letter to LA, Kenya Barris, and, you know, he said, I just want to find places you've never seen.
Yeah.
That is a
it's
huge
hard, though.
challenge.
Yeah, very much so. And even the buildings, they don't date back like 200 years or even 100, because there's not a lot of that kind of town planning thing going on.
Not in this town.
No. So it is hard. It is hard. I'll be interested to see that film and how
yeah, it's like he makes LA a character.
Oh, fantastic.
Actually, as part of it.
Yeah.
It's on Netflix.
Okay.
There you go. What was your inspiration for Inisherin here? And you brought them back, Brendan and Colin, known as the hitmen there, and that in very different roles here.
Yeah,
a friendship.
Yeah, what I always wanted to get Colin and Brendan back together, even you know, immediately after that film. It's crazy that it's 14 years, almost 15 years since we made it. So that was one of the things to do. In some ways, in Bruges is about those 2 characters or 2 men falling in love with each other, right, in a strange way, and this is the dissolution of love. So that was interesting to explore. But the initial impetus was just to tell a breakup story as sadly and accurately as possible, you know, and have the twist that it wasn't a romantic one, that it was a platonic one between 2 guys, and that's not usually explored very much in cinema, I think.
Hardly ever. And when I was talking to Colin, and I think even when I was talking to Colin and you early on in the run here, we talked about how sad this breakup is.
Yeah.
You know, particularly, well, I think for both of them, but actually for him,
For Colin especially,
to have someone say, I just don't like you anymore.
Yeah, yeah. His reaction on screen to that is I think one of my favorite moment in the film in some ways. It just takes the time and he goes through all the emotions of shock and heartbreak and sadness and confusion in 15 seconds, and it's all on his face.
And no dialogue there.
No, exactly.
You as a writer just say, play it.
Yeah, or as a director, just leaving him that space to feel, to react, and he just I can watch it over and over again. That moment, it's immaculate.
Yeah, that's the essence of great screen acting for me, is always through the eyes, and the less dialogue, the better, actually.
Absolutely.
So much of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one of the things I've learned since in Bruges, is to try and leave more space for that kind of stuff, to cut out some of the dialogue, to know that it's in the reactions as much as in the lines themselves that the heart of a film lies, especially a sad one like this. The sadness in Colin's eyes, in Kerry's eyes as well, and in Barry Keoghan, who's amazing too. Just giving them room to react and to feel is something I learned, and you learn that from working with brilliant actors like that.
Yeah, that scene between Kerry and Barry Keoghan, you know, the scene I'm talking about, is devastating as well.
Yeah,
you know, again, it's a love story, friends. One of them thinking something else.
Yeah, and his hope being crushed in that moment, and up to that point, he seems like the clown of the island or something. But it's in that moment that we realize that no one's a clown. You know, everyone has hopes and dreams, and that need to be respected. So he's brilliant in that scene. You know, he nails the comedy, he nails the heartbreak, but then Kerry at the same time, just the gentleness with which he plays that, you know, the lack of, and up until that point her character has been so dismissive of Barry's character, but just her grace and her kindness in that moment is what makes it such a heartbreaking scene, I think.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the humanity comes through in this almost more than anything, but it is tragic, it is violent, you know, where you watch a man who is not, you think, capable of violence.
Yeah, yeah.
Going
change
that
from
way.
the light side to the dark. Yeah.
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 Which was really an interesting transition.
Yeah, and Colin again just played that beautifully. Like when you're watching the first half hour, you can't, I think, imagine that he's going to end up in this place, and that's truly amazing acting.
A happy-go-lucky movie. Would you, I mean, a character in a movie, would you call him boring, that character? Because I asked him, is it difficult to play boring? He says, I don't think he's boring. I said, I didn't actually either, but people keep saying he's boring.
I don't think he's boring. I think
he's just, you know, a guy that
has his own interests,
right.
And they're they might be kind of narrow.
Because I watch that and I think, well, I'm more boring than that guy.
me too. But I think all of that most of that is coming from Brendan's character, and but he's not in a good place either. Right. So his categorization of Colin's character like that says as much about his inadequacies or his issues as it does about how boring or not Colin's character
actually is. His not fulfilling his potential.
Yeah.
That came very close. This is a dividing line between art and family and what you look at for yourself and what he just finally just in his head just like...
Yeah, he can't deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes from the despair that's talked about later on in the film. But also, it's interesting to explore the whole idea of art and how much time we have left, and what you should do to be an artist. Should you devote all your time to it? Should you avoid wasting time? And I think a lot of these things have been in the air since the COVID pandemic kind of thing went on. You know, if we get our time back again, are we going to change how we spend our time? It's something that I was thinking about all through that experience of the pandemic, is because I don't make films very often, as you know. So you're like, should I do more if one gets, if we get out of this. Should you do it like once a year, like a lot of filmmakers do? And I'm still sort of struggling with that question. And
you had filmmakers like Sam Mendes and Steven Spielberg doing very personal things, saying, I got to get this done now during the pandemic because I don't think there may not be a cinema when we come out of this.
That's
there
another
was that fear.
That's another worry, and it's still a worry. And I hope we're getting through to the other side of it. Weirdly, it's kind of cool that Top Gun has helped us, with that in a big way. So I hope that'll bring, well, that has brought more people to it, but I hope that has some kind of trickle-down effect with, smaller indie art house things. It doesn't feel it's quite back to how it was before COVID, but hopefully it's going in the right direction. I think we do got to get people out off their couches and back into the cinemas, or we'll lose art house cinemas and art house movies.
No, and that would be a tragedy, because you want to see a movie like this in a theater with other people. You want to talk, you can watch stuff on your couch all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the same, but it's been a great, I feel that way about Tar and Women Talking and Everything Everywhere and the Triangle.
Yeah.
All those things you want to see in a theater and have the debates afterwards. I was glad to have seen all of those in cinemas, and it's a different experience, hearing laughter and or reacting to a shock with other people is
totally
what it's all about, I think.
And you want to sit in Banshees and watch and go like, what is he doing? He's cutting off his fingers?
What's he doing that for? That's stupid. He plays fiddle.
You have a devious part of you. When I talked to you before, I asked you about the animals and, and the donkey, big year for donkeys, but Jenny, who's beloved and, you love it and then, spoiler alert, she tragically dies later in the movie, and I remember asking you, and you said, what's wrong with that? You make people love them in the first act and kill them off in the third. I've never forgotten that part.
Yeah, it's like Chekhov's donkey. Yeah.
You like that kind of dark thing.
I do. It's probably a little mean-spirited of me, because I did love that donkey. I do love that donkey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do like the idea, though, I don't plan things out in a script before I start, so I never know what's going to happen. I never know who's going to survive or who's not going to survive.
Oh, you don't? You don't have index cards?
None of that. So that keeps me on my toes. So at the start, even in the middle of this, I didn't know which of the characters would survive or which of the animals. So
what's your process there?
As shocked as you.
You just like to watch it like a viewer, and what's going to happen?
Yeah. So each scene will propel the next scene, and I never know what's. It's funny. It's like juggling a whole bunch of balls in the air, but as you're kind of getting to page maybe 30 or 40, some of those balls aren't going to make it.
Right.
And that's okay.
But in the end, and if you haven't seen it, don't worry. I'm not going to say everything that happens. In the end, it was very satisfying. I think the way you ended this movie.
I hope so. I guess a lot of my endings are. It's not easily wrapped up with a bow and you go out happily. But like with, I think, novels, I think a lot of good movies should bear repeated viewings, and you might get something different from it each time. I like the end of this. It feels, it might not be the most upbeat, but it feels exactly right for the story.
It was perfect for the story. So it really surprises me the way your process of writing is, that you don't know where you're going. Which,
even when I'm getting to the last 5 pages, I'm not sure what's going to happen with something like that. There could have been, a bigger fight in that moment, or anything could have happened. Even same with the end of 3 Billboards and all of the movies. I find that exciting, though, as a writer, to even in the last few pages not know exactly what's going to happen. Because if I feel that way, you hope that the audience is definitely going to feel that way.
Exactly. What are you writing next, then?
I want to get back together with some actors I've worked with before. So I think there's something about Banshees, just the quietness of it and the sadness of it, and how that's connected to people. That I think that's the kind of movie I'm going to be aiming more towards, rather than the Seven Psychopaths type thing. I like the quietness and the sadness. So more sad films, I think.
Well, that's okay. You know, the world could use more sad films, I think.
Well, I think,
that are human. You know?
Yeah. I mean, with lots of laughs too. I mean, it's
well, that's it. It's, you know, dark comedy in many ways.
Exactly.
So.
But I think I always felt like, you know, listening to like Leonard Cohen songs when you're in a sad place, it actually lifts you up. Hearing someone else express a sadness at the world. It's all positive. It's all art, and even though it's sad, it can be uplifting too, weirdly.
Suzanne takes you down to her place by the river. Yeah.
You can hear the boats go by.
He's a poet. So are you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Behind the Lens.
That was lovely, thanks.